Welcome to the Rusted Garden. Today I wanted to quickly go over how you can make your own seed starting mix. And I want to thank all of you that are watching my show, The Rusted Garden Show. It's a long format video series, 25 to 35 minutes, but I'm still going to make the quick videos for those of you that enjoy those. Today we're going to talk about peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, and how do you make a seed starting mix that is sterile and won't have fungus gnat eggs in there. So down the line when you're growing your seed starts like this, you won't end up with fungus gnats coming and causing a problem. And it's real easy to fix. We're going to either pour boiling water into the seed starting mix or we're going to microwave it, and I'll talk to you about that. After I get through the ingredients, I'll also bring a bowl in and we'll go and do a couple different mixes so you can see what they look like. So let's start with the basics. If you are just going to do a flat like this, then there's no need to really make your own because it's going to cost you more money in the long run. Of course, you'll have more supplies you could use over the years, but you could just pick up a bag of the Jiffy starting mix. And the Jiffy starting mix is really just peat moss and some vermiculite. There's no perlite in there. If there is, it's, well, that piece might be. If there is, it's so low it's not even relevant. But peat moss, vermiculite, and this is basically the mix we're going to make. If you go to the store and buy this bag, it's going to cost anywhere from $6 to $9 depending on where you get the bag. 12 quarts in there, perfectly fine for something like this, but if you're doing a lot of flats and then you're using your starting mix to transplant these up into cups, you're going to want to make your own. And the reason for that is you can buy, let's move my greens flats out of the way. You can buy fine vermiculite just like this. This is the vermiculite in 2-quart bags from anywhere from $20 to $30. That's 2 cubic feet. I think I might have said 2 quarts. It's a 2 cubic foot bag. It's a huge bag like this, and it really breaks down to about 60 quarts of vermiculite, and that's 12 right there for $6 to $8. Now, it's not an exact science. I think you actually end up with more quarts, especially when you get to the peat moss because it's so loose and fluffy. Peat moss you can buy in 2.2 cubic foot bags from anywhere from $10 to $15. So between those two, that's at least 120 quarts of material, and it's going to cost you somewhere between, say, $30 and $50, which is a lot cheaper than buying it that way. Now, the ratios, and we're also I'm going to show you how to pack these the right way so that you get, outstanding seed starts from the beginning. You just want it to be nice and dense when you do that. So let's go with the ratio that I start with. The ratio can be 3 things of peat moss, 3 equal parts. An equal part just means you're using the same measure. So these are all the same size bowls. So 3 equal measures of peat moss to 1 equal measure of vermiculite. This is perlite. I don't use this in my seed start mix. It doesn't have any value in my opinion. You could use it, it's not going to hurt, but it's just an extra ingredient you don't need. I like to use this when I make my potting mix to up pot the small transplants from here into 8-ounce, 12-ounce containers, and I'll show you how to do that too. So let's try and keep this simple. 3 parts peat moss to 1 part vermiculite. That's the base that I use. You can go to 4 parts peat moss to 1 part vermiculite if you want. That works perfectly fine. You could even go to 5 or 6 parts peat moss to 1 part vermiculite. And I think you get the point that there's no exact way to do it. And here's the reason. This is the mix right from the Jiffy bag, and it's mostly peat moss with a little bit of vermiculite put through. This is what the starting mix that I made looks like when you take 3 parts peat moss to 1 part vermiculite. You can just see a lot more vermiculite. This works well too. Now, no matter what you set up and design for your starting mix, or if you're using Jiffy mix, the problem is that gnat eggs, the fungus gnat eggs, can sit dry, typically in peat moss. You're not going to find any problem with the perlite. You don't need to microwave this or pour boiling water into that. Probably the same is true for vermiculite, I'm just not sure. But you get around it this way. This is a bowl of 3 parts peat, 1 part vermiculite, and I microwaved it for 1 minute 4 times. So I did a 1-minute microwave, stirred it, microwaved it again, did it 4 times, put saran wrap over it, leave it on there about 15 minutes, let all that heat and steam work in there. The microwave, the heat will kill the fungus gnat eggs, will kill funguses, you won't have any problems. Now before I go on, let me just say one thing. Make sure you start your starting mix with a dry mix like the Jiffy bag, any kind of starting mix that is dry, or you use dry ingredients. If you go out into your garden and you bring in any kind of dirt or soil, and you put it directly into your seed starting mix and you don't heat it or treat it, you're definitely going to get diseases, fungus, and insects. You're just going to be bringing in stuff from the outside. As soon as you put it under the lights, where it's warm, where the environment is perfect to get those things growing, they're going to start to grow. So I took my peat, my vermiculite, put it in here, mixed it through. Then you add water. You always want to add water when you are packing your seed cells. This should be a pre-moistened starting mix. The dry mixes would go in here. You would try and water them. They're going to float. It's going to be a mess. Always pre-moisten. So we pre-moisten the mix of 3 to 1. It goes in the microwave for 1 minute. I take it out, stir it, take it and put it back in for another minute, and I do that 4 times. Now, word of caution, because you're using a microwave with stuff that could potentially catch on fire, that's on you. If you don't feel comfortable using the microwave, well, I'll talk about boiling water in a second. So if you're using a microwave, make sure you're watching it the whole time. So after that, I can feel the heat coming up. Just make sure you don't put your hand straight into there or you'll get burned. But this is completely sterile. It's perfect for seed starting. You're not going to have any trouble with fungus, with any diseases, or with insects. You're going to basically kill them off. So I'm just going to stir this for a minute to let it cool down so I can show you how to set up your seed starting cells just like that. Now, instead of using the microwave, boil water, bring it to a full boil. This would be the dry mix of a 3 to 1 ratio in there, and just pour the boiling water in and mix it up with a spoon until it looks something like this. So this is the dry mix of the 3 to 1 ratio, and this is what it looks like when it's moistened, pre-moistened. Once you have it pre-moistened, I do this in all of my videos, you're going to drop the starting mix right into your seed starts and you're going to press it down. You want it to be nice and dense. The vermiculite and the peat moss will keep plenty of air pockets in there for your roots, and this is what you plant into. Alright, so let me clean this up a little bit. I'm going to bring out my big bowl and we're going to do a couple different mixes so you can see what they look like and decide what you'd like to use in your garden. Alright, so let's make some seed starting mixes, and I'll talk to you about how you would use them for potting up to the next level, and that's when you would take them out of your seed cells and then put them into bigger cups. First thing is fertilizing. I don't use any fertilizer in the starting mix. You can if you want to, but you have to make sure that it's soluble, which means that the plants can use it right away. If you use any organic products that have to be broken down by soil biology, they're just going to sit there, usually smell and grow fungus, because there's no soil life in there to take care of the organic fertilizers and make them available to your plants. Now, my belief is a garden wants to give. You just have to help it along, and this is one way to really get your garden started the right way, is to really have healthy seed starts. So remember the ratio that I start with: 3 bowls of peat moss, 3 parts peat moss, 1 part vermiculite, and this is what it looks like if you want to use something like this. It's extremely light. It's just like the stuff you buy in the store. It has a higher concentration of peat moss, vermiculite in there. But this will do perfectly well to help take care of your plants and get them off to become great transplants. Now, if you don't like the higher amounts of vermiculite, and a little more vermiculite or a heavier amount of vermiculite will keep it moist longer, and in some cases you may not want that depending on what you're growing. I find it's valuable because my seed starts dry out so quickly, I like to have something that holds moisture a little bit longer. This is what 4 parts peat moss looks like to 1 part vermiculite. And you can see it's hard to tell eye-wise, but you know, obviously there's more peat moss in there. It's more inexpensive that way. Peat moss is much cheaper, so the more peat moss you use, the more money you're going to be saving. And this is a lot of starting mix right here. And then this would be a 5-to-1 ratio. And you could go higher, but I wouldn't really recommend going past that. This is a really nice ratio. Now some people do put perlite in here for their starting mix. I just don't think you need it. But when we get to the point that your seed starts have started, you know, they get to about, you know, 1 inch or 2 depending on what you're growing, you're going to want to move them into containers. And when you get to that point, you can amend any extra starting mix or make a new batch by putting in, that's 4 ounces of perlite. And because your transplants into the cups are going to have more roots, more growth, you might want to loosen up your potting mix a little more. So that was about 4 ounces in there, and you can see the perlite. Let's go with another 4 ounces, so a total of 8. So this, I think, is perfect for a potting mix to pot up your transplants, just to let them grow a little bit longer before they go into the ground. So this would be 5 parts peat moss, 1 part vermiculite, and then 8 ounces of perlite in there for your potting up mix. And this is probably, let's just take a look. That's about another 8 ounces. If you want it to be more, this is 16 ounces of perlite. And you can kind of be your own scientist and decide what you want your plants to grow in. This is how I recommend making your own starting mix, how to make your own potting mix. And make sure that you put in boiling water or that you sterilize it with the microwave, just so you don't get fungus, disease, or fungus gnats. I also have a seed and garden shop at www.therustedgarden.com. I sell seed starting supplies. I'm also selling shirts this year. They come in this color, maroon and gray, and it's the Rusted Garden, and it says a garden wants to give. Something I really believe that if we help the garden along, it gives back to us as we give back to the garden. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out my blog again, or actually my blog at www.therustedgarden.blogspot.com. I host these videos and do a couple blog posts on there, and also check out my seed shop at www.therustedgarden.com. Thanks for watching.